This was the first time I realized that nobody taught me about money, and I didn't realize the damage until it was already done. Now, I probably was in about, I would say, $50,000 worth of debt at one time. And I was like thinking to myself, like, how did I even get here? And so now, in retrospect, when I think back about the steps and the journey that I took, I realized that there are some key moments along the way that were indicators that I probably just ignored and, like, put aside. So I was probably in my elementary school when my mom said, you should get a part time job. And, you're in elementary school, what can you do other than deliver newspapers? So I'm probably aging myself at this point, but yeah, I had a newspaper route and it was in my local neighborhood. And at the time, you would deliver door to door. So there were no main mailboxes or anything. You just kind of go up to the door and deliver the paper. And once a month, they would ask you to collect the fees from the individuals that have purchased the subscriptions. Now I think back, like, was that like child labor? I don't know. But it was my first introduction to people's relationships with money. And what I found fascinating about it is that every time I knock on the door, I get a different response. So it's like they knew I was coming because it's like once a month I had to go and do this collection, right? So I knock on the door and you'd get, this beautiful person who would just be so inviting and saying, "Oh, I have my check ready for you and how are you doing?" And, so bubbly and lovely. And then you knock on another door and you saw them in the window, see me, and then they'd be ducking. And it's like they're not home. Knock on the door, still no answer, right? And I'm like, great, this person's still outstanding. I gotta come back and talk to them again. And every door had a different response. And that was like my real first experience of, what? People treat money differently. And, if I fast forward now through my teenage years, I had several part time jobs. I think my first job I started working at was like 13 years old at a summer camp. And so, yeah, I had experiences and tastes of money, but the idea for me, and it's honestly, I think my mother did say this, that anything additional that you want, so if it was a name brand or if it was something special, then you would have to purchase it yourself. And so the part time job, that was the purpose. The purpose was to make money so that I could buy whatever I wanted. So this, I see now looking back that, maybe there is where, we could have changed my perspective or changed my mindset a little bit, because why not put some away? And I do think my mom probably did tell me to, save your money, because my brother was a much better saver than me. So she probably did, but I probably just didn't listen. I thought, hey, I have money now. Why don't I go spend it? And so, but yeah, I think that's where the beginning was of my spending pattern. And, having money readily available meant I could go out and purchase whatever I chose. So, again, let's fast forward a little bit more into my schooling university years. And I never forget this. I had a really good paying part time job. So I was able to pay for my education on my own. And, but, for some reason, I'm walking through the hallways of the school and there was like this booth and they were offering credit cards to students. And I remember passing or just about to pass the booth, and the person said, hello, they're trying to, get my attention. And I'm like, are you talking to me? Because, I was like maybe first year, second year student. I'm like, I don't think you're talking about me to get a credit card, right? And they're like, yeah, come over, And I'm like, okay. So I go over, we have this conversation. They say, yes, we can offer you a credit card and, you're going to have X amount of limit on it and it'll be great. And I'm thinking, okay, if you want to offer me this, then great, right? Well, not so great because no one explained exactly, the pros and the cons of a credit card. So, anyways, so as I received this card, if I look back at the other patterns that I had in the past, it meant free money, right? There was another limit on the card that I could possibly spend. And so, yeah, that was a kind of a downward spiral when it came to my money because as I accessed the credit, sure, I did pay some of it off. I didn't pay it off in full. I just paid what I could. And then I continued on to spend. And so now, all of a sudden, instead of like spending my own income, I'm borrowing funds, gaining interest, and paying off what I could, probably just the minimum payment. So, if I if I could go back, I would probably walk right by that booth and not stop. Or, what, just find some better, ask more questions or get better educated on what credit is all about. So, again, these are the patterns that we're building, as I was getting older and going into my adulthood. And I think the final thing that really made me identify where the problems were at was when my husband and I got married. And when we got married, we paid for our wedding on our own. So, we did save. I'm not saying that we didn't save anything. We did pay for our wedding on our own. But there was a little bit of a shortfall. So we decided to go into the bank to get a line of credit. Because people had said, it's a lower interest than borrowing off your credit cards. And so, okay, let's do that. So we go in and, we get the line of credit. And they say to us, and I'll never forget the statement that the banker made. She said, just remember that this is not free money. Okay, so how does this make, in my mind, I'm like, how does this any different than when I got the credit card, right? It's the limit that you can use. That's what I was thinking. So, so, we used it to help pay for some of our wedding expenses, whatever. And then all of a sudden, now we are tacked on with another bill that we have to pay monthly. Did we pay it off all at once? Probably not. We just, paid what we could. And so again, back into that cycle of debt, right? We're paying for things that we've already spent in the past, and now we're trying to play catch up. So those words ring true to me because had we thought about it, we should have created a plan maybe to save X amount of money and only spend within the range that we knew that we could afford and not just spend to the limit, right? So when I realized that I was in about 50K of debt, I kind of thought, you know what? We need to retrace our steps. We need to retrace how we actually got here. And I think it was just spending patterns, and my money mindset. So if I could go back now, luckily we were able to pay off that debt and learn some valuable lessons through all of that. And I will continue to share my story. So feel free to subscribe if you're interested in joining us in this conversation, because it's so important, right? Like just thinking about things before you just react, creating a plan before you just go ahead and spend. And I really had to change my mindset and my process of thinking when that occurred. So when we were trying to climb out of our 50K worth of debt, there are a few tools that I created just for ourselves in order to kind of recognize the patterns and change the patterns and create something that's different and new. And honestly, that is what has got us out of the debt, because it's very difficult when you have credit card debt that's climbing at like around 20%, or you have a line of credit debt, or even student loans can be something that just carry on for years and years because they're charging you, a smaller amount of interest. You really have to have a change in your mindset. Plans are great. All the spreadsheet tools are great. But the change in the mindset, I think, is the most important thing. So I did create tools for that, and I created it through a spreadsheet because that's just how I am. And it was like you had to give yourself rewards, right? Like for when you reach a target, or you would um, find different ways to do things. I remember when our kids were in soccer, and they have to bring snacks, and they go out for dinners and different things like that, and you have to have strategies around that, whether you save the money, whether or not you bypass some of the events. You really have to kind of come up with ways to kind of overcome the daily decisions that you make. We make so many decisions when it comes to money throughout our course of our day, just one day. We make so many decisions. And so if you don't have a plan, or if you don't have a strategy, you're just going to default to what you're used to. What are the patterns that you've did in the past? You're going to continue them. And so I really had to think about my mindset. I had to think about, finding strategies around spending additional money. And that is how we climbed our way out of 50K's worth of debt. So, yeah, if you're interested in the tool, or you're interested in some of the things, like if this resonates with you, then, share some comments. I want our community to be a place where it's a safe space to talk about this stuff. And I'm happy to share more of my experiences. So I'd love for you to subscribe and join us in this conversation. So if you don't know, my name is Carolyn, and I really appreciate you watching my video. I have conversations that most people don't want to have when it comes to money. So check out some of my other videos here, and I'd love for you to join the community. Bye for now.